Anyways, if you guys know who Rick Grenell is, he doesn't need an introduction, but he is special envoy to the president for special missions. He just brought back people from Venezuela. I think he just got named the head of the Kennedy Center. I had him speak last year at my conference. He was the most talked about speaker there. I mean, really a dynamic, connected guy. And he just told me that the President of the United States knows he's here and he's speaking to you guys. Everybody, Rick Grenell. You want to stand or sit, Rick?
Whatever you want. Let's sit.
We'll sit. This is a little odd stage here thing. We too close?
No, this is good.
So it's perfect timing, right? Market's down.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Market's down 1,700.
I'm sure you want to just talk about tariffs, right? And the market and all these great subjects. No, I think the timing is perfect.
Right.
The timing is perfect. I was, a little bit about me, I go to bed very early because I wake up incredibly early. I do a lot of work in Eastern Europe and the Middle East, and so I like to get up super early. So I was in bed here last night, and the president called me, and he knows, like, since I'm usually 3 hours behind, he can call around midnight, and I'm still barely up. And last night, of course, he called, and since I was in Dallas, I was already in bed, but I got up and I talked to him. So I told him that I was in Dallas, and he said, "What are you doing in Dallas?"
There you go. I really wanted to maybe give them, the audience, a state of, like, not policy, but kind of what you're thinking. I think you're really a forward thinker. And first of all, I don't have any idea how you do your job, because I see you in LA one day with the fires. I see you in Venezuela the next day. I see you doing stuff in the Middle East. I don't understand how you even get around and do it, especially when you're not really flying around on a private jet. I don't know how you do it, although it's just crazy. So maybe just tell us about what you're doing right now.
Yeah, I mean, trying to keep up with President Trump, I think, is the answer. I mean, the man never sleeps, and he's got an idea a minute, and so we're all just trying to keep up. One of the great things about the Trump administration is that your job is really not just your job, right? If you know the president and he knows that you know how to get stuff done, he's going to hand you stuff all the time, regardless of your job title. And so one of the first things we have to remember is that this guy is not someone who is linear in terms of how operations are done, how policy is done. He is somebody who likes to have voices in the room. It is not unusual to have your time in the Oval Office, say you're supposed to go in at 2 to talk about a subject, that the 12 o'clock meeting is still going on. He invites you in to give your opinion about that, and then you got to sit there while the 1 o'clock meeting goes through, and you're also giving your opinion on that, and it could be on anything. But if he trusts you, you're staying for these meetings, and he's giving you, you're giving him your opinion, and he'll take it. And sometimes he'll pick up the phone in the middle of the discussion and say, "Hey, call Senator so-and-so or call CEO so-and-so," and they're suddenly on the phone as a part of the conversation. Now, I worked for 8 years in the Bush administration. That would have never happened in the Bush administration, never. You're cleared, you know your talking points, your memo is sent to the president beforehand, it's signed off by the deputy assistant secretary. Nothing went into the president without there being eyes all the way through. Now, what does that produce? Status quo and mush is what I would say. Because a whole bunch of bureaucrats sign off on things. Donald Trump does not work like that. You won't be surprised. No. He wants to have a free flowing of ideas, and it's an immediate decision, and let's go, let's implement it. And he views that, his view is that the policy structure of the United States follows, the bureaucracy follows the decision of the commander-in-chief, because there was only one guy running for president who won, spending 3 years coming to meetings, constantly talking to people, and got the support of the people, and that was Donald Trump. The other person on the poster wasn't a deputy assistant secretary. It was Donald Trump. Who gets the blame for things when they don't go well? The President of the United States. And so I love the fact that he is demanding, once his decision is made, that the bureaucracy follow that. So what we're focused on right now is, I think, this brand new idea of trying to fix the economy for the people that it's not working for. Now look, I come from California. No one can afford a home in California.
They cannot.
But if you are in any other normal state, you want your kids to be able to afford a house. Home ownership in this country has plummeted. The status quo is not working for our young people. They do not believe that the American dream is attainable.
Right.
The only way our kids are getting homes these days is because the parents were so successful that they're writing a check to help them.
Right.
And that is not the American dream. And so when you hear a whole bunch of people screaming about the stock market today because of tariffs, those people are benefiting from the status quo. They don't want the system to change because they're benefiting from the system. But think about all of the other people who are not benefiting from the system, who are screaming. I've got nephews and nieces, none of them can afford homes. Not a single one can afford homes, and they're in their 30s. This is unacceptable for America. We are doomed if we don't have a generation that can believe in the American dream, achieve the American dream. And let's be honest, and I bet you in this room this is true. To live the American dream today means that you bought a home, you fixed it up, and you sold it, and you made some money. Or you bought something, and you held it long enough to where you made money. Capital gains. That is how people are living the American dream. And our young people cannot do that right now. And so are we going to see a shaking of the status quo? Yes. Are we going to see a whole bunch of people screaming because they don't like the stock market and what's happening? All of those people are benefiting from the status quo, and I just say, hang on. If you were on the other end of my phone the last 24 hours, you would see prime ministers and presidents from at least 7 countries have called little old me to say, can you get a message to Donald Trump that our country will go down to 0, we will not charge you tariffs, we will do a free trade agreement, please let us off the hook. Now,
Let's go.
as soon as that permeates through our system, people are going to see that we are going to have a president of the United States who upended the system so that we have free trade, fair trade, and our young people can finally afford something because they got money in the bank.
I hope we got that on camera. I know that you don't want to talk policy. I was actually going to ask you, how do you think the first 48 hours are going with tariffs? But I appreciate you. You're so good at this. You kind of know what people want to talk about ahead of time. What about what it seems like is, to me, a collapse? I might be wrong, but it seems like the Democratic Party is collapsing. And what I mean by that, and that's just my perspective, no one's giving me that perspective, what I mean by that is they're doubling and tripling down on what I consider to be insane policies. They're attacking Teslas that were, it doesn't make any sense to attack fellow owners of a Tesla who probably were Democratic if they're in California. Can you comment on the status of the Democratic Party, or maybe at least your thoughts on what's happening there in leadership?
Well, first of all, there was a miracle that just happened as I opened up this water, and they fill water to the very tippy top these days. And you literally spill it every time you do it.
Right.
And I, with a blue shirt on stage, took a sip of water and did not spill it. Now, that, to me, is remarkable, right?
Is that your way of saying you're not going to comment?
No, what is going on? No, of course I'm going to comment. Look, I think that there is a collapse of the Democratic Party because they are the party of elites right now. You look across the board of what Donald Trump has done to the conservative party, the Republican Party. First and second generation Americans are at the forefront. They love this guy. Working class union guys love this guy. You know who the Republican Party doesn't have? It's the elites. All of those people who are never Trumpers are the ones who are super elite. They probably loved George W. Bush and Mitt Romney. And Donald Trump is not them. He wants to remake the Republican Party. He's going after trying to deliver, and to be honest, many of the messages are just like Bernie Sanders. To be honest,
they're the same message.
They're the same messaging, which is let's help people who aren't being helped. And the difference is Bernie Sanders wants to do it through the government. Donald Trump realizes when you make government smaller, that's when you can help people. And that's what we're trying to look at, the number of jobs that are being cut. The jobs report just showed for the second month in a row that the economy in the private sector is adding more jobs than the government. Now, that didn't happen under Joe Biden.
Right.
The economy was only there because he kept adding jobs to Washington, D.C.'s bureaucracy. I worked in Washington for the first time, this is how old I am, in 1994.
You're younger than me, though.
I was working on Capitol Hill. It was my first job, okay? What's happened to Washington since 1994 is immoral. The amount of money and buildings and job creation and hangers-on and lobbyists, it's unbelievable. Now, I've worked at the State Department for 12 years, and we go after corruption around the world. We talk about leaders who are corrupt. In our country, we just call it lobbyist. Are you ever surprised when the government moves from Joe Biden to Donald Trump that all of the lobbyists around the Pentagon are now Republicans and they were Democrats? We don't even flinch at that. We say, well, of course, that's the system. Donald Trump and a Republican is president, so now all the Republican lobbyists are getting their contracts. That's corruption. I'm sorry. But we have to call it out. We have to shrink this city. And one of the things that I love about President Trump is he's willing to take the hits of the media constantly saying, look at this person who just got fired and they voted for Donald Trump, but now they lost their job. Look, we want to create an economy where that person finds another job very easily, not has to move to another department at a Washington, D.C. bureaucracy. We cannot have a Washington, D.C. that's stronger than the rest of the cities. Washington, D.C. works for us. It should be a small city. Our founding fathers wanted you to be a temporary resident of Washington. We've got people who've lived in Washington now for 3 generations, and that's just the media. It's really atrocious of what's happened and how much we've accepted this. So I'll finish with this on this question. Shame on us for allowing the system to grow the way it did. We cannot expect that anyone in Washington, D.C., whether they're a lobbyist, a media person, the bureaucracy, they will never vote or advocate for shrinking their city. That would be akin to going to Los Angeles and saying, I have this great idea. Let's get rid of movies. Everyone is going to kill you. And so don't expect to go to Washington, D.C. and get support from the media that is based there to shrink the D.C. budget. They love it. I am the president of the Kennedy Center now, and you can't even believe the corruption that's been at the Kennedy Center.
Ouch. Really?
The woman who had the job before me was making $1.4 million a year. When I arrived, we had $0 in the bank. We had 0 in reserves. And we had been paying for the last 6 months, paying the salaries of Kennedy Center employees with debt reserve money. Our balloon payment in 2030 cannot be met right now because of this corruption. Her assistant was making $260,000 to be an assistant. The lawyer was making $550,000 plus had an outside counsel. The head of PR was making $280,000. This is a nonprofit. And she had the audacity to go on 60 Minutes this last Sunday, the woman who had the job before me, and say, this is a nonprofit, we're not supposed to make money. Like, yeah, but you're not supposed to be in the hole either.
Right. This, by the way, is the most ridiculous logic ever. I
Right.
can only say it's we have a very, very tight window because he's going to be live on Fox shortly at 1 o'clock. So if you guys have questions, we're going to answer them. We're going to start questions in 5 minutes. Hold on, in 5 minutes. But I want to get to my question, which is, if you follow my social media, you know I was with Trump on the last day of the campaign in Pittsburgh. I'm a huge fan of the survival of this man and what he did not have to do, his commitment, which is incredible. I am a big believer, if you saw me earlier, on cryptocurrency and what's happening with sort of the deregulation of the market and sane policy. I told you guys I was debanked multiple times under the Biden administration. Is there a chance, is it true, and I apologize if you don't want to comment, but I believe that 4 years is not enough for any president. Wish it was a little bit more length of time. Is it possible that there's any chance that this whole thing about another term is possible, or do you think that's highly unlikely?
I think it's unlikely. The Constitution is what it is, and we need to be able to stick to that. Of course, I'd like Donald Trump to be the president forever. I love his policies. I think he's fantastic. But he's changed the Republican Party. He's changed politics. He's changed the way we're going to vote. I believe that for the next 20 years, that we're going to be sitting around talking about who is the America First Trump candidate in 20 years. Just like we've done with Reagan.
Sure.
Whoever worked for Reagan, had a picture with Reagan in the primary, won immediately.
Right.
If you demonstrated you were closer to Reagan than the other guy, you won.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's how we're going to do it now with Donald Trump. Going forward, whoever is close to him, whoever has been a part of the messaging, who has been a part of the policy, is going to win because he has fundamentally changed the way we're looking at Washington.
Trump is, the administration's almost fighting a multiple front war with Democrats, sort of collapsing and people, attacking the Tesla thing, trying to solve the war in the Ukraine. Can you comment on the war in Ukraine at all?
Sure. Look, I'm a foreign policy guy, so I've been watching this with a lot of frustration. What you're going to hear from me is diplomacy, right? I never worked at the Pentagon. I think we've got a lot of voices talking about war. We have had very few voices talking about a diplomatic solution from the beginning. And that's my problem, is that the President of the United States, when he or she is sitting at their Resolute desk, there needs to be two voices in front of them. One is the Pentagon saying, we're ready, sir, to not negotiate and to totally go in and kick some ass. The other one is a diplomatic voice, the Secretary of State saying, not right now. We still got things to do. We can leverage on tariffs. We can do economic sanctions. We can do a whole bunch of different things before we get to that. I never saw that. I didn't see anybody talking about diplomacy. Anthony Blinken, he has his own plane. He should have been able to parachute in to whether it's Kyiv or Moscow with a whole bunch of foreign ministers from around the world saying, no, we're not going to have a war. We never did that. What we saw is politicians take your money and be asked by the media, are you for more spending or are you not for more spending? That was the only question we were being asked. You for more or not more money to go to war? And that's where I think things got off. We need someone who's going to push hard on a diplomatic, peaceful solution. It's never easy. We handed Joe Biden peace. He handed us war in both the Middle East and in Europe. It's very difficult to peel us back, but I think we have to do it.
So Rick, to me, is one of the hardest working Americans, one of the hardest working political people out there, a diplomat. And I don't know if you guys know this, but under the Biden administration, we had prisoners in Venezuela. And it made no sense to me that Rick's effectively comes to his office. And can you talk about going to Venezuela? I don't know if you guys know this. Most of you probably do know that Rick brought back a lot of hostages effectively from Venezuela. Can you talk about what you did there? I thought it was remarkable.
Yeah. It was a secret deal. The president had me go down and negotiate, and I came back with 6 Americans who all had unbelievable stories. They were not criminals, but they were in prison for what the Maduro regime called, crimes. And it was heartbreaking to be there, to negotiate. They didn't want to release them. I insisted that I was going to go home with 6. I waited on the tarmac for about 2 hours, waiting and waiting. To be an American, I was there on an Air Force plane, surrounded by Air Force young men with guns, protecting the plane, protecting me as I went in to go one-on-one with Maduro. And then when we came back after negotiating, and I said, I don't want to leave without 6 hostages. We weren't sure we were going to get them. And we waited as Americans on the plane, on the tarmac for about 2 hours. And then suddenly some cars rolled in. And I was like, okay, let's see if we got 6 or none. And so I walked down onto the tarmac and I watched individuals get out of cars, Americans, fellow Americans, with black hoods over their face and their arms in handcuffs and their legs in handcuffs. And they would get out of the car. And I would later find out that these individuals had no idea what was happening to them. They didn't know if they were going to be shot, transferred. They didn't know. And I walked up. By the time they got to the third one, taking the hood off, they were doing it individually. I walked over, and the first two, I said, get on the plane. And I was there in front of the third guy. As they took his hood off, I could see in his face total terror. Looked at me, didn't know who I was. And it was the most incredible moment of my career ever. You'll never hear me say that about any other thing. But in that moment, I got to look at that individual who had terror in his face, and I said, I'm Ambassador Rick Grenell. I was sent by Donald Trump to come here to free you. I'm an American diplomat. Get on the plane, you're going home. And that individual grabbed me, broke down, hugged me, was sobbing. And for the first time in my life, if you know me, I'm pretty hard.
Yeah.
But in that moment, my career crashed with my personal life. Probably for the first time. And I was fighting back tears and emotions because here this individual had no idea what was happening to them, and now they were on the plane. He would later tell me, while sitting on the plane, he said to me, I don't have much in my life, but whatever I have for the rest of my life is yours. And I said, oh, no. I just did my job. We're so grateful for you to be home. Just be a contributing member of society. And we have 6 new Americans back home.
That's right. I'll tell you what, this is why I feel so great about Rick Grenell and what Trump is doing and trying to do. No one's perfect, but Rick is a true American. I want to take some questions if you guys have some. You got me all emotional.
Can you comment on Iran with the diplomatic and military voices you talked about?
You said Iran? Yeah. Look, I spent 8 years at the UN Security Council inside listening to every IAEA report on Iran. I heard John Kerry talk about how the heavy water was not a violation, which it was. I heard him say, multiple times, I heard John Kerry say, they had X amount of centrifuges and we've stopped them. That was a lie. We never knew. The Iranians have been lying about it for a long time. But the reality is that we've got our partners in Israel. We've got our intelligence services. I was DNI, and so I can tell you we have amazing intelligence. It can be better, and we should improve it, and I have some ideas on how to do that. But the reality is that we're watching them very closely. They're not going to be able to get away with it. They're not going to be able to get to a nuclear weapon, but they're secret. And I know President Trump personally because I briefed him on intelligence during my time as DNI. I know that he is completely focused on making sure that if we have evidence that they are breaking out, if they are getting close to a nuclear weapon, he won't allow it. He will absolutely not allow it. But I will say that the State Department has been terrible at negotiations because we've had really bad negotiators believing what the other side says. And we can't do that, whether it's in North Korea or Iran or Venezuela. These are tough issues. And I think that you have to have diplomats who are tough and who don't care what the media says and who can go in there and fight for America. Talking, remember, is not weakness. And too many times what they try to do is they say, oh, Donald Trump went to talk to Kim Jong-un. I think talking is a tactic. And when you get in the room, if you're good, you can convince the other side or demand or do diplomacy. But Joe Biden didn't speak to Vladimir Putin for more than 3 years. And we were told by the media, and we're still told by the media, that somehow that's a good thing. That somehow Joe Biden was punishing Putin by not talking to him. I actually think talking to Putin is a fantastic idea. And let me finish with this. The media jumped all over the Trump team when they went to Saudi Arabia to speak to the Russians. And if you remember, the media were going crazy. Why didn't you invite the Ukrainians? Why are you just speaking to the Russians? I was on TV saying, I'm sorry, we've had 6 meetings with the Ukrainians. The Russians weren't there for any of those meetings. We went constantly talking to the Ukrainians. We've heard their side. Diplomacy means now we got to hear the other side. Before we bring them together, we got to hear the other side. One time we go to speak to the Russians and our media in Washington have a meltdown. They don't know diplomacy. They don't know how this works. Don't listen to them.
Most logical guy in politics. All right, we have time. What are we looking like for TV right now?
I got about 3 minutes.
3 minutes, 3 total minutes for Rick Grenell.
Could you have a quick answer about how we should
Probably
feel about
no.
China?
On China?
Yeah, aggression and.
I mean, look, China's a very big problem, and I'm grateful that President Trump is focused on it, talking to President Xi. But let's be clear about President Xi. That it's not a stable situation there. He does not have everything under control. He's got his own internal problems, and I'm not sure that he's going to be there for very much longer.
Really?
I'm not suggesting that he's gone this year, but I think he's got internal problems that will, over the next 2 or 3 years, be unsustainable.
This show is called The Money Show, and I think everybody in here, I think the average net worth of people in here is around almost $6 million. I wish mine was that high. Just kidding. I think they probably do want to hear what your thoughts are, at least on the state of mind for what's happening. You gave it a little bit in the beginning where you said prime ministers are calling you, but what if you were to have a crystal ball? What do you think's happening right now in the market in the sense of the reset? I mean, how should people's perspective be on what is about 3,000 points in 2 days?
Yeah.
But lower rates, and you saw little job owning going on. What do you think about that?
Yeah, look, the market is watching the negotiations, and the market is constantly just describing what's going on, and they want certainty. Right now, it's uncertain. So I think that's okay. I think just stay put. President Trump knows exactly what he's doing. We see on the other side a whole bunch of countries that are wanting to negotiate and wanting to get to free trade. If we go through this and we end up getting free trade, he's going to be the biggest hero ever. And that's what we're focused on. So just ride it out a little bit. I would finish with this. It is a negotiating tactic, but it's also, for President Trump, a way to get the playing field more fair. There's a whole bunch of countries that have been taking advantage of us for a while, and I think President Trump wants to collect on some of those tariffs for a little while. Depending on the country, there's not going to be a one-size-fit-all policy. He's going to do each country or region a little bit differently according to what they've done to us. And so it's going to be very fair, but the one thing is certain, Donald Trump is focused on the American taxpayer and the people who are not participating in the economy right now, and that's what is going to be solved. We're going to make sure our young people are able to afford housing, that we're going to get the playing field much better so that our manufacturing base can come back. Interest rates will fall. This is all on a very good trajectory. I feel great about it. And I know President Trump is completely focused with people like Scott Bessent and Howard Lutnick and Kevin Hassett. If you don't know who Kevin Hassett is, find him and follow him. He's amazing.
Everyone, Rick Grenell. Thank you, Rick.
All righty, thank you very much. I'd like to encourage everybody to go have some lunch. If you've got a pink ticket, pro or preferred, your lunch is over.